Hello, and welcome back to this. What is this? I need to come up with this. Hi! Hey guys, how you doing? Good to see you back. Hey! Hello, welcome to my show. Welcome back, people. Hello! Hi. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. Today we have a very special guest. You may not have seen him, but I know you've heard him. Please welcome our friend, Paul Manafort. I think that's somebody famous. Today we have a very special guest. You may not have seen him, but I know you've heard him. His name is Paul Johnson, I guess. Better known as Charlie Brown's teacher. Hello, and thank you for having me on your show. What do you think? Okay, observational studies. So here are our goals and objectives for today. If you want to read them, I'm not going to. Feel free to pause your video. So some clarification, most books talk about three types of studies. Experimental studies, where subjects are randomly assigned to treatment conditions. For example, subjects are randomly assigned to eat red meat for a period of 6 weeks or not. Then various biomarkers are measured at the end of the study. These are generally high in internal validity but low in external validity, as we talked about when we talked about internal-external validity. Observational studies, there is no manipulation of the independent variable. For example, studying the relationship between heart disease and meat consumption among vegans versus non-vegans. But did someone randomly assign individuals to vegan or non-vegan groups? No. So it's very low in internal validity. We can't really make conclusions of causation from that, but it's generally high in external validity. And then quasi-experimental studies, it's kind of a hybrid. So subjects are not randomly assigned to groups, but the treatment is randomly assigned to groups. So for example, you have two classes of yoga athletes. One is randomly assigned to be vegan for 6 weeks, and the other is not. And the problem with these, it's better than an observational study, but the problem is that those two yoga classes self-selected into those classes. So if you have a night class versus a morning class, and you randomly decide which one gets to be vegan for 6 weeks, well, there are probably differences between those who are in evening classes versus those who are morning classes. And that might threaten the validity of inferences. So maybe a decision tree is in order. Is the IV manipulated? If no, then it's an observational study, which is what we're talking about today. Wow, apparently we have 3 guests on the show. Oh, with that, why don't you take the next part?
Yeah, please, thank you. Is the IV manipulated? Yes. Then are participants randomly assigned to groups? Yes. It's experimental? No. It's quasi-experimental.
Very good. That brings back memory. Don't know about you. So the take-home message, each design has its strengths and its limitations. Combined, however, one study's strengths support the other's weaknesses, and we should never be content with just one study. Remember, we are looking for converging evidence across. Go ahead, this is one of them interactive kids shows. Converging evidence across. I can't hear you. Good, multiple studies. That was just awkward. Okay, why is that? Because multiple studies using multiple methods will address these threats to validity. Today we are talking about observational studies. So in observational studies, we may investigate the effect of one variable on another. For example, eating meat on health. But again, we have no control over the IV, or we just may be investigating a single variable and not actually have an independent variable. For example, mating culture among Peking ducks. You may want to study the mating culture of Peking ducks. Ask me how I know. How do I know about the mating culture of Peking ducks? Well, let me show you. Oh, camera's stuck, camera's stuck. Oh, better put this on auto exposure. Do that? Oh no. Okay, gotta pause the camera. Okay, going outside. Going outside. Gonna see my Peking ducks. Gonna see my Peking ducks. Don't worry, folks, we'll keep it G-rated. Oh, you hear them. Quack, 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 quack. Quack, quack. Quack, 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 quack. Quack, quack. Quack, quack. All right, while we're out here, we might as well feed them. Oh, look at that. There's my bucket with my food. Soak the food because they digest it easier. Watch them go nuts, people. Oh, yeah. Why do I have ducks, you say? You wanna know what I say? Why don't you have ducks? Are you kidding me? Have you looked at them? Are they not the cutest things in the world? Okay. That right there is why I have ducks. Okay. You ever tasted a duck egg? I didn't think so. You know what you're missing out on? Heaven enshrined in egg shell. People, seriously, duck eggs are delicious. Alright, so back to the topic at hand. Oh, exposure's way off, but that's okay. I'm a shadow. Okay, so back to Peking duck mating behavior. So back when I used to run. I used to run, that's funny. I actually did used to run. And in my neighborhood, there was a lake that I used to run by. Very pretty lake. And one day, on this lake, I look over, and to my utter astonishment, what do I find but... I've got to set this camera up while I'm talking here. So what do I find? But... I'm sure you're dying with anticipation about what I found. I've got to fix my camera. Okay, let me go back to manual. Sorry, my camera just quit. Apparently it's my sign that it's time to stop talking about duck mating behavior. Moving on. All right, for example, mating behavior among Peking ducks, or gang culture in inner city Detroit. Ask me how I know. Actually, I have no idea. In this case, we're not interested in identifying causal relationships. We simply just want to learn more about the behavior as it naturally occurs. So these tend to be very high in ecological external validity, especially if behavior is observed in a natural habitat. And they tend to be high in population external validity, but low in internal validity if you're making causal inferences. So how do we best observe behaviors? Well, first, okay, so what do we mean by observation? Well, what's the difference between scientific and casual observation? In scientific observation, the goal is to describe the behavior as fully and accurately as possible. And so we can do this either directly or indirectly. Well, what's the difference? In direct, we collect data as it occurs, and indirect, we collect data after the behavior has occurred. So direct observation, you observe the behavior as it occurs. It has the highest potential for a comprehensive and holistic picture of that person's behavior. But there are some potential problems. For example, reactivity. Reactivity means that the participants alter their behavior because they know they're being observed. Somebody's watching you. Better act normal. So this is a threat to internal validity, especially if you're trying to make causal inferences. And so what is the solution? The solution is habituation. So for example, I am being directly observed in my driving behavior by my insurance company. They're having me put this little device in my car that measures the rate at which I accelerate and the rate at which I stop, because apparently that's correlated with the probability of an accident. So as one who can occasionally stop quickly, never. Okay, I do. You better know, you better believe that I am going to drive differently when I first put that thing in. But the problem is, and what they're counting on, is I'm going to habituate to it. I'm going to get used to the fact that it's there and forget, and then default to my regular old driving behavior. So my premiums are going to go up. Observer bias. So that's another potential problem, is observer bias. The observer's behavior influences their interpretation of behavior. Police officer example, and I don't recall off the top of my head what that is. Let's talk about that in class, because that was, it's been a couple weeks since I read the book and I can't remember what that is. So systematic errors of bias. Observer bias. Forgot to explain what that is. So, well, I said observer's behavior influences the interpretations of behaviors. So if I'm going in and I expect to see something, I'm going to have confirmation bias. And I'm going to interpret things in a way that fits the way that I think about things. So what is the solution to this? The solution is to be blind, that you don't know the purpose of the study, you're just observing behavior as it happens. And then also demand characteristics, which is I guess is a form of reactivity. In demand characteristics, participants perform based on what they think you want to see. And this will threaten the internal validity of your study. Again, if you're trying to make causal inferences. And what is the solution here? The solution is to be blind. So people have no idea. So I guess this would be from the participant's point of view. They have no idea why you're observing them and what you're looking for. And that, in conjunction with habituation, eventually they're going to stop reacting to you being there and they'll just be normal. That's how, I guess, reality TV shows work. Reality. They get used to cameras and then they start acting normal, supposedly. I don't know, if I were on national television, I'm not sure I would ever act normal. Hi kids, you're not driving me nuts right now. Indirect observation. We don't observe behavior as it's happening. Instead, what we do is we observe evidences of behavior, such as physical traces, like alcohol bottles and garbage cans, cigarette butts and ashtrays, and tools in one's garage. Or we look at other evidences of behavior, such as archival records, which are documents that are produced, either running, which means they're being produced continuously, or episodic. For example, birth certificates are an example of an archival episodic record. So what are the pros of indirect observations? Well, they are non-reactive. Or is it? Okay, if you think about Facebook, Facebook is a kind of sort of a running, produced continuously archival record of people's behavior. And in situations like that, you tend to put your best face on Facebook. And so you kind of are being reactive. And likewise at a trial, people are recording everything that you say. And the fact that you know you're being recorded influences your behavior in a way that is reactive. So, but generally the pros are that indirect things are non-reactive, and the cons, they may suffer from construct validity issues. So is beer bottles a good measure of alcohol consumption? Like, for example, one time this last summer, I went on vacation for a week, came back, and there were beer bottles in my garbage can. I have no idea how they got there. We don't drink, but there were beer bottles in our garbage can. It was the weirdest thing. Who puts beer bottles in somebody else's garbage can? Wonky! So if you were to use number of beer bottles in somebody's trash can as a proxy for how much they drink, that might not be the best idea. It might not be a very valid measure. How about bumper stickers on a car? Well, I've had my truck for, I want to say 7 years now. And to this day, I still have stickers on my truck from the previous owner. There's a Duck Dynasty sticker on there and a wakeboarding sticker. I don't wakeboard and I don't hunt ducks. And yet those stickers are there. In fact, frequently I get people saying, "Hey, what's up? You like," and then they'll use some term that I'm totally unfamiliar with, and my eyes glass over. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then I say, they're probably looking at my stickers and assuming things about me. That brings us to quantitative and qualitative. So in quantitative research, we define exactly a priori the variables of interest and exactly how we want to define them, or in other words, we create operational definitions. And then we force responses into our predefined categories. You ever taken a survey where it says, which of the following applies to you? And you're like, none of the above, and there ain't none of the above. That's kind of annoying. So you're forcing people to answer a specific way. And it permits easy summaries of data and extrapolation to other instances. But of course it has its limitations. So examples of quantitative measures: scores on Beck's depression inventory, number of times someone hugs a bear in a particular predefined amount of time. So that would be quantitative research. It's easy, easier to synthesize information and that sort of thing. Now with qualitative research, we may or may not prompt participants to respond to a question. We leave the responses as open-ended as possible. We create categories from the open-ended responses to create summaries, or we don't. And it yields a richness of information that is not easily condensable. And these may not generalize to other circumstances, and it's very difficult to remove observer bias from the people who are recording and or coding the observations. So examples, we might ask participants to describe an event where they were depressed, then later read through and search for themes. And I think there may be this perception that there is this angst of qualitative and quantitative researchers. I think there may be among some of them, but within the last 3 or 4 years, I think it is, APA Division 5 has become the quantitative and qualitative, and there's like assessment and psychometrics or something like that. We have actually merged divisions, and it's actually kind of cool to get two different perspectives. And as a quantitative psychologist, I think we rely way too heavily on quantitative research, and we need to step back, and do a little more qualitative research. There's a richness of information there that we are missing, especially when you think about the replication crisis. That wouldn't have happened if we had done qualitative research, if you ask me. Now, controlling causality. The biggest problem with observational studies is the lack of control. So do vegans have less heart attacks because they eat less red meat, or is it because they tend to be healthier? How do we determine the true cause? Well, what we can do is we can, quote unquote, control for healthy behaviors. And so what that might mean is that we find vegans and meat eaters that exercise the same amount, then see if they differ in terms of heart attacks. Okay, so we're trying to control for exercise. And presumably we have controlled for that confound. And now we can conclude that vegans have less heart attacks because now can we conclude that vegans have less heart attacks because they eat less red meat? Well, we've controlled for healthiness or exercise. Well, no. Maybe it's because vegans are more compassionate, because they choose vegan for moral reasons. And compassionate people are happier, healthier, and have less stress and less heart attacks. And so now we've got another confound to deal with. Okay, so maybe then what we do is we find vegans who are vegan for non-moral reasons and compare it to meat eaters who are not meat eaters for not moral reasons. That doesn't make sense. Anyway, can we now conclude that vegans have less heart attacks because they eat less red meat? Well, still, no, there might be another reason why vegans are systematically different than meat eaters that we would then have to control for. You see the problem here? that's the problem with observational studies, is you can always think of another reason why the groups might be systematically different, and no amount of control can fix that, because there may be some reason that you're not thinking about. So what is the point? Observational studies have their strengths and their limitations. The strengths, they have a high degree of generalizability and they have high ecological validity. Limitations, they are filled with confounds, and even after controlling for dozens of variables, we may have missed one confound that is really important. So how do we overcome this limitation? Well, we can't. But you can perform experiments testing the exact same hypothesis. If you get the same answer, then you be in business, folks. And what is that term again? Converging evidence across? Louder! Multiple studies. So with that, here are our objectives. Hopefully we feel comfortable with the things that we've covered so far. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our special guest. Oh, thank you. It's been very good. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for letting me come. What a sing-song voice. It's been our pleasure to listen to you. It has brought back memories of peanuts for me. And thank you.